Okay, so we're going to look at Stormcast Eternals today. We're not going to be evaluating how powerful the army is or how powerful the units and rules are so much as we're going to be looking at the design of the rules, whether they convey the theme well, whether they are functional, whether they're fun to use and they like give units an appropriate role, or whether they're a bunch of dead rules that no one's ever going to use or that don't really work when you think about how they're going to operate in the game. So, that said, let's get straight into it. We're going to have a look at battle traits first. They kept their Celestial Realm. In fact, they lost, I think it was called Storm Keep. So, they used to be able to get bonuses to their control score or something in lieu of being able to deploy in Deep Strike, but now you just have the Scions, half of it. You always deploy in Deep Strike. I think that's really thematic for the army. It fits with their sort of narrative and their background, but it also fits with the feel of playing an elite special forces army. Other armies are going to have lots of different units and lots of chaff, so they can spread out across the board and take up a lot of space. Stormcast Eternals don't have a lot of units, but they make up for it by always being in the right place at the right time, and an ability like being able to set up in reserve and deep strike onto the board really helps with that. Then we've got Heaven Sent. Once per battle, your movement phase, it costs a command point. And I think lots of these setting up replacement units cost a command point. I think they just recognize that there's quite a lot of power in getting more units. So they're trying to, I guess, tax you a little bit. But I feel like they could either go with once per battle, or they could go with the cost. If they had a cost of like 3 command points, maybe, then you'd be tossing up, do I want to get this half strength unit back, or do I want to have those 3 command points? Whereas having the dual cost, I just think is a little bit weird. Anyway, you get to pick a friendly, non-unique Stormcast Eternals infantry or cavalry unit that started the battle with 2 or more models and that has been destroyed to be the target. And you set up a replacement unit with half the number of models from the target unit, rounding up more than 9 from all enemy units. So you can't pick the Stormdrake Guard, and I think that's just because they're the most expensive and perhaps a little too much value out of the ability. This encourages you to take a really expensive unit. So you only get to do once per battle, you get to bring back a replacement unit. And so you want to pick one of the best units in your book to bring back. And that might be a reinforced unit of Annihilators with Meteoric Grandhammers. That's 440 points. So you basically, whatever you take, you reinforce it, and then you'll get a normal, not reinforced unit as a replacement. So you can get a whole unit of Annihilators with Meteoric Grandhammers or Concussors, or you could get like Evocators on Dracolins. I think there's one more, the new Reclusians. Oh, they're not actually that expensive. But I guess you could take a unit of Reclusians, or even really just anything that's reinforced that costs more than 200 points is probably worth bringing back with this ability. So one thing I want to highlight is that it encourages the Stormcast Eternals player to have that really powerful, expensive unit in their army outside of Stormdrake Guard, because Stormdrake Guard won't be infantry or cavalry, I'm pretty sure. Stormdrake Guard, yeah, they're monsters. And I assume that's because 360 points is possibly a little too much value to squeeze out of this ability. Thematically, I'm not sure I like Heaven Sent. Doesn't feel like a very Stormcasty ability to me, but it's not a bad ability by any stretch. It just seems to run contrary to that hyper elite army type of feeling that things like the Celestial Realm help reinforce. This thing makes them feel more Soulblight Gravelordsy, like you get replacement units. I feel like of all the armies, this is the least thematically appropriate in terms of that feel of being a hyper elite army. You could make a case about, oh, they've got reforging or something like that, but even this doesn't talk about reforging. It's just saying more reinforcements are sent down from Azir. Surely every single army in the game wants to send more reinforcements, so the theme just really isn't there on this ability for me. So we got pick a dead cav or infantry unit that's not a hero. Get a half strength replacement. The other way to look at it is like you just get another unit for free. You get some extra points in your list that you have to put in the Celestial Realm. I guess one small distinction from that kind of way of thinking about it is you can't have those extra points on the table at the same time. So for a big army like Skaven or Soulblight or something that have lots and lots of units, they can spread out across the board because they have all of those units available to them at the same time. I guess Soulblight, they have a lot of replacement units as well, but they also have a really big board to start with. Whereas this allows the Stormcast player to have more points in their list without giving them the ability to spread out more. So there's a sense in which it helps them be an elite army, but I think overall it just feels like you're adding extra units and making them a bit less elite. So theme is weird. Doesn't feel elite. All right, their finest hour. Once per turn, army your hero phase. Pick a friendly Stormcast Eternals unit that has not used this ability this battle to use this ability. Effect for the rest of the turn, add 1 to wound rolls for that unit's combat attacks and add 1 to save rolls for that unit. I think the biggest thing to note about this, especially in contrast to the old finest hour ability, I mean, firstly, you can use it on any Stormcast Eternals unit. You don't have to use it on just a hero. But the main thing is you have to use it in your hero phase. So the main use for their finest hour in 3rd edition was to protect a hero from being destroyed this turn. Often it's being picked as the target of a battle tactic or something, or you just need to preserve this unit. You've put it in a really exposed position and your opponent's likely to deal a bunch of damage to it this turn. So you pop finest hour and you get +1 to your save because it was really part of the save stacking edition. You could load up a big monstrous hero with Mystic Shield, give them finest hour, use all out defense, and that would be really, really difficult to kill for a turn. You can't do that with their finest hour because it only works in your hero phase and it only lasts for the rest of the turn. That's not to say it's a bad ability, it's still very good, just that you will be using it for the wound roll a lot more than the save roll. Because typically in your own turn, you don't want to be taking a bunch of damage. You don't want to be making a bunch of save rolls. So mostly it's going to be about that wound roll. There are some situations where the save rolls thing helps, like if you use one of the abilities that lets you fight twice in a turn, but gives you strike last on the second one, presumably like you're going to fight, there's still going to be a fair bit of an enemy unit left in front of you because you need to fight twice to kill it. They're going to hit back and you're going to make a use out of your save rolls, and then you're going to fight again. So having that +1 to wound and save rolls is really helpful for that sort of strategy. The fact that you can't use it on the same unit more than once would be a little bit frustrating in some other armies. In particular, other armies might only have 1 or 2 units that can really make good use out of adding 1 to the save rolls and wound rolls. But in Stormcast Eternals, where even your chaff is okay in combat, it still does a bit of damage and it's still got a good armor save. Any unit can step up, have their heroic finest hour, and still do a fair bit of damage. So I think this is on theme. It's a useful ability. It's quite powerful. Just keep in mind that you'll get a lot more use out of it for the add 1 to wound rolls than you will for the armor save. So pick a unit, gets +1 to wound and +1 to save. until end of turn. And I guess once per unit. On theme. And yeah, I think that's it. Just it's on theme. It's good ability. It's a, I think, quite a powerful ability, and you won't mind having it. Okay, battle formations. We've got Sentinels of the Bleak Citadels. This is a once per turn army, any hero phase ability, Ancient Aura, pick a friendly Ruination Chamber unit. It should say, the same way up here it says to use this ability, it should say that here. Pick a friendly Ruination Chamber unit to use this ability. The reason why it's meant to say that is because in the core rules, there's a line about who's using the ability, and if the player uses it and picks a unit to target, then it's the player using it. But if it explicitly says that the unit is using the ability, then the unit counts as using it. And this is relevant for it'll be more relevant when we look at the Vanguard wing thing. But the reason I think in this case, it's meant to say that the unit is using it is because up here it says once per turn army. Every time you see this army in brackets, it's telling you that a unit is using the ability. Because if it just said once per turn, if the player was using the ability and it just said once per turn, then, well, there's only one player. So, of course, it's once per turn for the whole army, because once per turn for the player means you can only use it once. There's always only one player using the ability in the book, right? So you don't need this. This is superfluous if the player is using the ability. You only need this distinction where there are multiple units that could use the ability, but you're only allowed to use it once across the whole army, despite the fact there are multiple units that have it. If you don't have the army distinction, then it's once per turn for each unit that has the ability. So this tells me that the unit is using the ability, even though it doesn't explicitly say that the unit is using the ability, and it probably should say that. Again, once we get to the Vanguard wing, it'll be clearer why I'm making this point. Anyway, you pick a friendly Ruination Chamber unit, and it gets a 5-up ward for the rest of the turn. Worth noting, you can use this in any hero phase, so use it once in your turn, once in your opponent's turn. Once in your turn, once in your opponent's turn. Very, very flexible. You can pick the same unit over and over and over. You can pick different units, so you can do something like give your guys the 5-up ward, charge them in and fight, and then in your opponent's turn, you can pick a different unit that maybe they're going to charge and try and deal damage to. Very flexible. Also, doesn't have this problem where it forces you to pick like your entire army as Ruination Chamber units. If it was like Ruination Chamber units all get a 6-up ward, then that would encourage you to spam Ruination Chamber only, and it'd feel really bad including non-Ruination Chamber units in your army. But this kind of construction for a faction ability, it's powerful, it's useful, it's flexible, but it also lets you take a mixed list or take different units and have a varied construction. So I really like this ability. I think it's neat, kind of 10 out of 10, feels very elite, feels pretty Stormcasty, covers one of the key Stormcast problems, that's mortal wounds, just makes them really durable. Not much bad to say about Ancient Aura. So we've got battle formations, and first one is pick a Ruination Chamber dude. They get a 5+ ward. I should say every hero phase. Yeah, dude, he's fine. It's a unit. The unit is a dude. Thunderhead Host, Synchronized Strikes. Add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Warrior Chamber units while they're wholly within 12 of any friendly non-hero Stormcast Eternals unit that does not have the Warrior Chamber keyword. Sounds a bit word salady, but just like any Warrior Chamber unit next to any non-Warrior Chamber, and you ignore heroes. So initially when I saw this, I was pretty down on this as a bonus because the only warrior chamber unit we'd seen at the time, I'm pretty sure, was Liberators, and I assumed that the warrior chamber, sorry, was just replacing the Redeemers, and so like all the kind of crappy battle line Stormcast would be the warrior chamber, and then everyone else would be some other chamber. But that's not the case. There are actually lots of things that are in the warrior chamber. It's not just it is those units. It's not just those units though. So yes, it includes Vanquishers and Vigilors and Vindictors, but it also includes like the Annihilators with Meteoric Grandhammers. So you can get +1 to hit on your Annihilators, which are a really powerful high damage unit. So obviously you want to buff when you can. You want these buffs on more powerful units, and there are actually some pretty powerful units in the Warrior Chamber. So I like this. Again, it sort of discourages you from spamming. This one's actually a bit stricter about it. You have to have some Warrior Chamber and some non-Warrior Chamber in the same list. But this is really useful if the units that you want to buff are those Warrior Chamber units. And it's pretty easy to include other ones like all the Dracothians and I think the new flying guys that are actually old things, Prosecutors. There are lots of units that you can get this buff from. So actually quite like this. It's just that when I initially saw it, I thought it was all the crappy dudes that got the buff. So that's pretty neat. I just want to make a note about this one. So good that it doesn't force you to spam Ruination guys. And same thing, we've got +1 to hit if you're within. So, going to hit on Warrior Chamber if you're within 12 of non-Warrior, excluding heroes. So good because some real damage dealers. All right. I do want to make a point. It's only combat attacks. So there are like, I think Judicators are warrior units and Vigilors are warrior units. You only get it on the combat attacks, which I get, that's a bit sad. Only on combat attacks. Yeah. On one hand, it's a bit sad. On the other hand, I'm not that big a fan of having lots of really powerful shooting. So, you know, it's not too bad. Vanguard Wing. So once per turn, army, your movement phase. Pick a friendly Vanguard chamber unit that is not in combat to use this ability. Effect, roll a dice. On a 3+, remove that unit from the battlefield and set it up again anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 from all enemy units. So there's a second reason to think this one implies that the unit is using the ability. It's not just that it's got this army inclusion, but it's also a core ability. And I'm pretty sure core just means there's in the rules of 1, it says units can't use more than one core ability. I think that's the only purpose for core as a keyword, and that only affects units. So core doesn't affect the player at all. It just means that you can't use this ability as well as another core ability in the same phase, or the unit can't use 2 in the same phase. And the reason why that is relevant is because the unit can't be in combat. So the thing you could do if the player was using the ability is retreat the unit out of combat and then use this ability to teleport it. But because it's core and the ability is the thing using it, it won't be able to retreat and then teleport. It'll just won't be able to use the ability at all. This is not a bad ability, and in another book, I would say potentially it's even a good ability, but you've already got a lot of deep striking. And you've already got a teleport. Your priests can do translocation on any unit, like they don't have to pick Vanguard Chamber. This does add to that, so you can teleport 2 things in a turn, and like it's not useless, but it's the kind of thing where you're already spoiled for choice on it, and that sort of degrades how useful picking this is. The fact that it's only Vanguard units, I think is the same sort of feeling as the other ones up here, where they're like, you can take some Vanguard units and some non-Vanguard units and you don't feel terrible about doing this. Maybe you pick some Vanguard units to go deploy on the Vanguard and some other units to hang around your Lord Relictor. So your Lord Relictor can teleport those guys, and the Vanguard units can use this to teleport. So your whole army has a lot more teleporting. So it's not a bad ability. It's not useless. But it's the kind of thing that there's very little reason to take it. Vanguard units also, a lot of them are very fast. I think all of them get like run and charge and run and shoot. And a lot of them have like 14 movement, like the Paladors and stuff. So I'm not certain how useful this ability is. But it's not bad. Having a teleport like this is pretty good. Oh, sorry, I have to talk about the 3+ a little bit. It's bad that this is on a 3+. It doesn't really need to be. It's not powerful enough to require this. And being able to guarantee something like a teleport is it makes a big difference in how useful it is. In 3rd edition, people would take the Relictor to get +1 to chanting rolls, so your translocation would go off on a 2-up, and then they would give him High Priest, so you can re-roll the chanting roll. You know, fair enough, the Stormcast Eternals command traits were really bad, so you were either taking High Priest or Master of Magic, but people would take High Priest on the Relictor to get that 2+ re-roll on the teleport. It was very, very important. On the other hand, part of the reason that was so important was because you would often complete battle tactics by picking a unit that's on the battlefield and then putting that unit, let's say, on the edge of the battlefield to complete the battle tactic. The new battle tactics, to my knowledge, the ones that require you to just go stand somewhere, also specify that you can't have been set up this turn. I'm not sure they require you to pick something on the battlefield. They just say you can't have been set up this turn. So this doesn't really help you do that battle tactic. But the 3+, maybe that's not as big a deal. I think this is the kind of ability that gets more than twice as good when you know it's going to happen. So that weakens it a lot for me. So pick a Vanguard unit on a 3+, teleport it. Vanguard unit not in combat. I'm also not sure about the restriction about being not in combat. I'm pretty sure translocate you can use in combat. I'm not sure why that's necessary, since you have to set up 9 away anyway. Yeah, it feels like they could have just picked a unit in combat. Maybe that'd make the 3+ make some sense. I guess one thing. I only just thought of this. If you pick the unit to use the ability and you roll the 3+ and it fails, that unit has used a core ability this turn and won't be able to use a movement ability. So if you've got like a movement 14 unit of Paladors and you're going to teleport that unit of Paladors using peerless maneuvers and it fails, that unit can't move at all because it's used this ability. Actually, I hate this ability. I'm glad I noticed that because that ruins the ability entirely. So it's inexplicably a core ability. Actually, I don't know why I'm doing this as that. It's a note. It's inexplicably a core ability. If you fail your 3+, then you can't move. That's terrible. So I do not like peerless maneuvers. I think that's terribly designed. I think it should either be a guarantee or it shouldn't be a core ability. because there's already a restriction on using a movement ability after you get set up, and there's not much advantage in moving first and then teleporting, except that you could move out of combat. But I don't really know why the combat restriction's there. So if I was designing this ability, I'd probably guarantee it and remove the core on it so that you can guarantee the teleport and you're able to use this as well as retreat in the same phase. I think that's fine. Like still keeping the not in combat thing means that you have to take the D3 mortals from retreating. If that's their intention, like they don't want you to just retreat for free, maybe that's why they've got that restriction, but you take the D3 mortals and then teleport away. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like this ability the way it's written. Okay, Lightning Echelon. Once per turn, army, any combat phase, oncoming storm. Declare, pick a friendly Extremist chamber unit that charges turn to use this ability. Effect, roll a dice. On a 3+, that unit has strikes first for the rest of the turn. Strikes first is really easy to overestimate because there are times when strikes first is really powerful and really backbreaking, but it depends a lot on the timing of the ability. If you can give like a Terrorgeist with a ton of buffs, strikes first during your opponent's turn, then it can be really hard for the opponent to deal with it. They're like, no matter what I use to try and kill the Terrorgeist, it's just going to kill that unit first. Even if I've got a really powerful hammer unit to try and kill the Terrorgeist, they're going to kill a bunch of the hammer before I get to attack. So I'm only going to have half a hammer unit, and I might not even kill the thing. So it's a way of using your offense as a defense. But in other situations, strike first is very weak, barely usable at all. So that sort of situation is where you don't know if you're going to have it because it means you can't rely on it. And you really have to, when you're using strike first, even when you're using it in your turn, for example, the thing that you're doing to make the use out of strike first is you're engaging in additional combats. And in particular, you're engaging in additional combats where you expect your opponent to do a lot of damage to you if you strike second. Okay? So normally what you're thinking is my opponent has 2 hammers or 2 really powerful units, and I've got 2 hammers, and I'm trying to take both of those out in the same turn. And so I want to strike first with a unit and take out that hammer, so I'm not going to take a bunch of damage, and then I get to pick my other unit as my first activation in the normal combat step and destroy that unit. So now I'm not taking any damage from either of their hammers, and both of my hammers get to do a lot of damage. So strikes first can be very useful, but you have to know that you're going to get it to make that use out of it. And it really depends on when you find out. If you find out in the hero phase, then you can maneuver your units into position and then shoot the right units and then charge into combat, and you can make a lot of use out of the fact that you know you're going to strike first. You can also do something where like maybe you have 2 units that charge a single powerful enemy unit, and you can fight with both of them to destroy that unit, and it doesn't get to fight back. It's the same sort of thing. If you don't find out until the charge phase, well, you can still make some use out of it because you can roll your charge and see whether you get in or not, and you know before you go into combat and expose your troops to damage, then you know whether or not you have strike first if it happens in the charge phase, like at the start of the charge phase, right? If you can do it before you roll your charge roll. Even at that point, you can't maneuver your guys into position and shoot the right things and all that sort of thing, but you can still decide not to make that charge. Okay? Lightning Echelon happens when you're in combat already. So you already have to move your guys into position, you already have to charge into combat, and right at the moment when your opponent is about to hit you, right, you've exposed your guys to getting hit by this massive hammer that the opponent has. Just before that is when you decide whether your plan, or whether you find out whether your plan is going to work. That's why I don't like this ability. Right? It's the timing of when you get strikes first. So you pick a friendly Extremist chamber unit that charged this turn, roll a dice. On a 3+, that unit has strike first for the rest of the turn. If it was a guarantee, and maybe it was once per game, I might like it better, right? The fact that you don't know if it's going to work means you have to commit to a fight that you might lose before you know if it's going to work. You have to gamble. Or the alternative is this ability just doesn't do much, right? So the alternative might be I'm going to charge into 2 combats this turn. I'm going to charge my fulminators into the enemy hammer, and I'm going to charge over here. I'm going to charge some annihilators into an enemy chaff unit, right? Some useless chaff unit. Obviously, if I get the 3 up, that's great. I get to wipe them both out. If I don't get the 3 up, then I fight with the fulminators first, and I wipe out the enemy hammer unit so I can avoid taking damage from that unit. And then I take some hits from the chaff unit, but it's a chaff unit, so I'm not taking much damage. And then I fight with the annihilators and wipe out the chaff unit. So the difference between having oncoming storm and not having oncoming storm is that I get to avoid some attacks from a chaff unit. That's not very powerful, okay? So this, because of the timing of the ability, like Strikes First is really, really powerful, but because of the timing of the ability, because you find out so late whether or not it's going to work, it just makes this the weakest possible version of Strikes First. It's still okay. There are still times where it's useful. It's just that it's hard to plan around, and you've got to take big risks to make the most out of it. You have to charge into a combat that you don't really want to charge into unless you have Strikes First, and then you have to make the roll to get the Strikes First. Okay? It's hard to explain until you do it, right? If you play this army, you play the Extremist chamber, you've got these dudes with Strike First, you commit to a big turn and you get in combat, and then you don't roll it and you get blown out because of it, that's going to feel really bad, and you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. I really don't like the design of this ability. I would be okay even if they just moved it to the charge phase, or even if what you could do is put it on the charge roll. So you could say, so long as you charged higher than a 6, so like if you got a 7 up on the charge roll, then you get Strike First for the rest of the turn. That would push the information for the player really far back and weaken the ability. They don't want to give you a really, really overpowered ability. You'd still have to set the unit up and put it right in front of the enemy unit, right? You're in charging distance, but it would still give you that last moment to say, actually, I don't want to do this combat. I'm going to choose not to have it. It would even give you the weakness of, if you had 2 units, let's say you're charging an enemy Maw Crusher, and you've got 2 Extremist Chamber units that charge, you would have to, if you charge with the first one and you made the distance, but you didn't roll 7 or higher, then you would have to decide then whether you're going to use this strategy or whether you're going to gamble for the next one, right? Whether you're going to try and get the 7 up on the next Extremist Chamber unit. So not a bad ability, not a weak ability necessarily, but very hard to use effectively, very risky to use effectively. So we got combat phase, pick an Extremist Chamber unit. On a 3+, it gets Strike First. Typically, you want to know the order of combat before you get into combat. Actually, I should just write that here. You need this information sooner. Unreliable is an issue. Not the rule for me. I'm not a big gambler. I just think this is bad design for this type of thing. But I do like that it doesn't force you to spam the Extremist Chamber guys either. I guess none of these force you to spam anything. So I can just cut that out and be like, good that it doesn't force you to spam. And good that these don't force you to spam. All right. As a whole, these things are pretty good set of options. There are some powerful abilities. I much prefer Synchronized Strikes and Ancient Aura in terms of design. I think there's a bit of a problem here, mostly creeping in with the unreliability. I think sometimes what happens is you latch onto a thing that you want for your design, like oncoming storm. Maybe they're like, yeah, I want my extremist chamber guys to be able to fight first, right? I just want them to have strikes first. But just giving them strikes first every turn, that's way too powerful. So we need to find a way to make it weaker. And the intuitive way to make something weaker is to just make it a chance to put a dice roll on it. But I don't think they understand necessarily, maybe they do, I don't think they understand how much of a difference the unreliability makes, not just to like the power level of the ability, because certainly it makes it weaker, but it makes it a totally different ability. If you knew this was going to happen, it would completely change my mind about how good this is. It goes from something that like denies your opponent a few chaff damage to something that you can wipe out your opponent's most powerful unit pretty much guaranteed without it having a chance to fight back. That's the kind of difference it makes, just the fact that it has a chance of failing. And the same thing over here. The fact that you don't get to move after you fail it, that's a big deal. It'd reduce the risk so much if you didn't have to, if you could still move after. And the same thing here, it would reduce the risk a lot if, sure enough, it doesn't work all the time, right? You still have to roll a 3+, that's fine. But if you get to roll that 3+ in your hero phase, it changes the ability entirely, right? It matters so much, the fact that it's unreliable and the fact that the unreliability is happening so late in the turn. All right, I'm going on about it a bit. Let's go on to heroic traits. Okay, we got Staunch Defender. While this unit is contesting an objective in friendly territory, so it doesn't have to be wholly within, but just in friendly territory, add 3 to the control scores of all friendly Stormcast Eternals units contesting that objective. All right. So while contesting, we need while contesting, add 3 to all the contesting units. Works for the hero himself. Doesn't have a range. I really like that. So doesn't care about range. An ability like this could easily be like, oh, you have to be within 6 inches of the guy, or even within 12, because as much as objectives are, I think they're 6 inches across plus 40 millimeter in the middle. If you had a unit on the exact other side, and because it's a wholly within and it was positioned so the unit is not all on the objective, even having a 12-inch range, you could get out of range with some units in Stormcast, and that'd be really annoying. You don't have to worry about that at all. You just have to get the hero onto the objective, and then everyone on the objective gets 3. Not 3 inches, just 3. I'm not sure how powerful this is. It's really hard to judge if this will even come up, because I know when I started seeing these abilities come out, I was thinking the objectives are smaller than they used to be. And my experience of objectives is mostly if you can get on them, they're yours. But the big problem is your opponent will screen you from even getting on them in the first place. So you have to like spend a turn hitting the screen and then spend a turn walking onto the objective and all that sort of stuff. And units in Age of Sigmar are so killy that if you can get on the objective, you've probably killed everything on the objective to get it. So it didn't really matter about the points. But I am hearing from play testers, or not play testers, but people like Vince who have played the game with the rules, so I guess play testers, that this does matter a lot. So I think that works quite well. It's not a huge buff to the hero himself, but if you have a couple units, adding 6 or 9 to that objective score could be relevant. I'm not certain about the power level. It is a little bit dull of an ability. All right. Maybe I'll make that a bit dull. Okay, we're looking at Shock and Awe. Effect. Each time a friendly Stormcast Eternals unit is set up wholly within 12 of this unit, using Scions of the Storm ability, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target that unit for the rest of the battle round. Okay, so if you set up in 12 with the Scions ability, you get -1 to hit in combat only. Oh no, not in combat only. All right, works in both. but it doesn't matter, because if your opponent's shooting you in your turn, then they get -1 to hit anyway. This is going to be a specter every time I notice this. Every time you get -1 to hit rolls to anything, it just seems to me like it should affect their shooting, but I'm reminded consistently that your opponent's shooting already has -1 to hit rolls. So you can't use this to protect yourself against covering fire. And it's really hard to use this in combat because you have to set up 9 away. I mean, there are ways to get in combat, but you have to set up 9 away most of the time. So already there's a good chance you, on the turn that you get set up, you're not taking hits. But even if you do get in combat, you make the 9-inch charge, or you get some other bonus and some strategy to get in combat, chances are you are getting into combat because you are going to win that combat, right? It's your turn. You're trying to get into fights that you are going to win, and you're trying to get out of fights that you're not going to win. So getting -1 to hit rolls against you, getting a defensive buff, is not that useful because you're hoping that your opponent isn't going to do much damage to you in any case, right? You want to do a ton of damage to them and leave them in a position where they can't do much damage to you. So this kind of ability is very, very difficult to use, even without the 12-inch restriction. I feel like the Stormcast used to have this, and it used to be board wide, and even then it wasn't a very good ability. So this is a super awkward ability. I don't think you'll use it much. Maybe if your general is an imperatant, you might use this, but for me, it's very, very awkward. So very awkward. You don't want to get attacked on your turn, and you'll probably fail your charge anyway. So the key units that might use this might be something like the prosecutors, because they've got a 3d6 charge. So they're the kind of units that could deep strike and then make a successful charge. But prosecutors, I have a feeling the use case for isn't going to be as like a hammer. It's going to be as a unit that harasses enemy units, or that sort of hangs about and forces your opponent to protect their rear. Because if they leave any unit exposed, any little hero or any like war machine or something, a bunch of archers, if they leave them unprotected, those prosecutors can drop in and commando style get into that weak unit and deal a lot of damage. In that case, you don't care about this either. So, and your unit's going to be deploying probably more than 12 away, unless you're also using the hero, you're deploying the hero next to them. So I don't think Shock and Awe is very good. I don't like the design of this ability. It's just super awkward to use and not very fun. If it gave you like +1 to hit rolls, that would probably be better if it was an offensive buff, because you're using it in your turn. Or if, yeah, there's just lots about it I don't like. Okay. Your hero phase, Envoy of the Heavens. Declare if a friendly unit was destroyed in the previous turn, pick a visible Stormcast Eternals unit wholly within 12 of this unit to be the target. The target has a ward of 5 up until the start of your next turn. Okay, so it doesn't care about where the destroyed unit was, but you got to be wholly within 12, and then you get a pretty powerful effect of a ward of 5 up. I think this is okay. This is usable. I mean, you don't want your dudes to die, but that's probably going to happen, and you can give your most powerful unit a ward of 5 up. Even if you're playing like Storm Drakes, right? Say you have a 720 point unit, 4-man unit of Storm Drake Guard, and you've got the hero standing next to them, and then a bunch of other chaff in your list. If one of your chaff units dies, you can give 720 points worth of Storm Drake Guard a 5 up ward and until the start of your next turn. That's awesome. That's a huge, huge ward. I I think this is actually pretty usable. You want to take it in an army that has a decent number of units. And if you are taking, for example, if you are taking that 720 point, the reinforced Stormdrake Guard unit, then you probably also want another unit that's reinforced to make use of that Heaven Sent. And that's going to leave you with very few units left over for something like Envoy of the Heavens to trigger on. So there's a little bit of awkwardness. But even if you're just picking like a 500 point reinforced unit of concussors, right? That's still a really good target for a 5-up ward, and it lasts until the start of your next turn. There is a little bit of awkwardness with the timing, like because it's your hero phase and it cares about if it was destroyed in the previous turn. So if you take a double turn, the previous turn is going to be the turn that you took. So it's unlikely that you had a friendly unit destroyed in that turn. Or if they take a double turn and they destroy a bunch of your units in the first turn they take, and then they don't destroy any in the second turn, well, in that case, you're probably pretty lucky that their second turn of a double turn didn't destroy any units. But it can also mean that you don't get a chance to trigger this, even though you took casualties, which is a bit frustrating. But other than that, I think this is pretty well designed, and it's not bad. Yeah, I kind of rate it. I actually like that ability. So if a unit died, if one of your units died last turn, pick a unit in 12, it gets a 5+ ward. Good effect. Wide range of viable targets. So you don't want your guys dying, but you can use this on anything, right? It doesn't even have to be a different unit. If you put this, if your hero that you put this on is like a Star Drake or something, you can just pick the Star Drake that it's on, or you can hang around Krondus, right? You can get your general to hang around Krondus. You can put this on Krondus, right? There's a lot of good targets in Stormcast Eternals for a ward, and it's not discriminatory. It's not really strict. I feel like this is much better than Shock and Awe as far as like, these are both defensive abilities. They both protect your units. This one is much more likely to prevent damage than Shock and Awe, in my opinion. I would have liked to have seen maybe something that like makes your unit a bit more defensive. So we've got like 2 defensive things and then a points thing. So maybe a little bit of overlap here, but overall, not a bad selection of heroic traits, assuming that Staunch Defender does something. Bit down on Shock and Awe. The Staunch Defender could be good or bad. Envoy of the Heavens, I think, is usable at least. So not super exciting, but not a train wreck either, just sort of mid. All right, Artifacts of Power, I should say. Once per battle, end of any turn, Null Pendant. Pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target. Subtract 5 from the target's control score for the rest of the turn. Once per battle, end of any turn. That seems weak. Okay. Once per game, pick a unit in combat. It gets -5 to its control score. So immediately, this sounds like Conqueror's Crown. Slaves to Darkness have a similar artifact, but I'm pretty sure theirs is just a passive, and it's like every unit in combat gets -5. It's not just pick one. So I have a feeling this is really weak. Sure, there might be a situation where 5 makes the difference, but geez, once per game, subtract 5 once. Wouldn't I rather like kill some dudes and that lower their control score? Yeah, I don't know. I can't see this being very good. It's just kind of boring. Boring seems weak. Seems weak too. Like, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it. Just seems bad. Once per battle, any combat phase, Quicksilver Draft. This unit has strike first for the rest of the turn. Hey, that's pretty good. It's very reliable. You know that you're going to use it. Ooh, there's a bit of... Okay, Quicksilver Draft works very nicely with Lightning Echelon. Okay, so once per game, Bearer gets strike first. All right, it's on. This is good because it's reliable. Makes up for the unreliability of Lightning Echelon. Okay. What you can do is pick Lightning Echelon, have this oncoming storm, whatever. And if you make your 3-up, then it's all good. You don't drink the potion. But if you fail the 3-up, then you drink the potion. So this is like a backup that you can make use of the Lightning Echelon, right? You can still get that bonus, and you essentially get multiple uses out of the Quicksilver Draft. Every time you make the 3-up, you don't have to use the Quicksilver Draft, and you get the strike first thing. So it gives you that reliability. So one of the units has to be the unit with the Quicksilver Draft, but so long as you've got a powerful hero, and I think you do, in the Extremist chamber list, you probably will take, or not probably will, you might take the, I don't know, the guy in the Stormdrake Guard, the hero that's on the Stormdrake Guard. He deals a fair bit of damage. You might take a Stardrake. And I think those do a fair bit of damage now. So this is pretty potent. It's also just a good effect on something like that, something that deals enough damage. Like I was saying, the good example is you can use it in your opponent's turn and you can put it on something that does a ton of damage, and it's just hard for your opponent to deal with. And if that's the case, if your Stardrake is really good, we'll get to that War Scroll eventually, this is a really powerful effect to have, even just once per battle. So I actually really like this. I think Quicksilver Draft is neat. It just depends on having a War Scroll that can make good use out of it. All right, passive Mirror Shield. This unit cannot be targeted by shooting attacks unless the attacking model is within 9 of it. Okay. Mirror Shield. Be Mirror Shielden. So this is what it used to do as well. That's why I'm not writing what it does. I know what Mirror Shield does. It's the same thing it's always done. It's not as good as it used to be, because now you've got Guarded Hero for free, so you already can't shoot at your foot heroes unless you're within 12, so long as they're standing near something. So Mirror Shield there's a large overlap with Guarded Hero, but you can put Mirror Shield, again, on things like a Stardrake, and the difference between 12 and 9 is really big. Right? Guarded Hero means that if they've got a spot they can deep strike, they can still shoot you, because they'll be 9 away, but within 12. But Mirror Shield means even the deep striking guys, they can't shoot you. And you can put this on a really big unit. You can put it on like a Stardrake or that Stormdrake Guard guy or whatever. So this is a really powerful artifact. And in light of seeing these two, that makes me very confident Null Pendant is useless. So, doesn't hold a candle. Doesn't hold a candle. Weak options for non-combat heroes. Okay, so big thing. Strong works on big units. Or I guess strong on big units. 9-inch is much better than 12. Okay, so the only thing I want to point out about these artifacts of power is that they're not very good if you have a small foot hero. If you don't have a big Stardrake or a what are they called? They're like Knight Draconis or something. Yeah, if you don't have one of those to put these on, then they're significantly weaker. Mirror Shield still does something. People used to take Mirror Shield on the like Lord Relictor or something just to protect him. He probably doesn't need that. Because he's got guarded hero now, so you probably don't need to put mirror shield on him. And the null pendant is just a boring option. So unless you have a powerful combat hero, then you're not making much use out of your artifact, and that's a little bit sad. Would have been nice if null pendant was an option you could take if you wanted a support hero or a non-combat hero to be your general, or not to be a general, but if you wanted to give your artifact to a non-combat hero, you aren't running any strong combat heroes. Whereas I guess up here, that doesn't really matter if you've got like a combat hero or not. This thing's pretty generic and usable on everything. Just this one is let down a little bit by this lore is let down, or the selection is let down. But if you're taking a Storm Drake, you're taking a Star Drake or something, you've got some good options. These are very powerful on those bigger units. All right, the spell lore. Is that where we're up to? Spell lore. This is I shouldn't say my favorite spell lore. I haven't seen them all. But this is a very well-designed spell lore. I was very happy when I read this. I thought, if they're all like this, we're in good shape. This one is leagues ahead of some of the other ones I've seen, unfortunately. Some of the other ones fall a bit short. Anyway, just a general note on spell lores. What you want is something in your unlimited slot that you can cast pretty much all the time. You want it to be very, very generally applicable, not situational. Okay? And then in your other two slots, you want something that is perhaps a little bit more powerful, but a bit more situational. So when you're in the situation when you need it, you've got a powerful spell available. But when you're just standing around and you're not necessarily in any situation, when you're in a generic situation, then you can fall back on and use your unlimited spell. Okay? That's what you want out of a spell lore from a design perspective. That's just how you want it to work. Okay? There's no point giving unlimited to a spell that you barely want to use ever. Okay? So let's read through these. You've got Lightning Blast. Pick a dude to cast the spell, then pick the closest visible enemy unit that has not been picked to be the target of this ability this turn to be the target. If two or more visible enemy units are tied, you get to pick. And then make a casting roll. Inflict D3 mortal damage on the target. So it is an unlimited range spell. It just hits the closest thing. You can't hit the same thing more than once. That's fine, I think. It's something for your wizard to do when he's not casting good spells. When you're not casting Thundershock or Starfall, you don't waste your spell cast doing nothing. You've got Lightning Blast. You can chuck D3 mortals at something. You get to cast a spell and do something useful. It's not a hard spell to cast. It doesn't have a huge effect, but it's useful. It's neat, right? You always have something useful and available. 10 out of 10, right? So closest visible dude takes D3 mortals. Unlimited. Spot on. Non-situational. Perfect unlimited spell. I think this is good. I think this sets a benchmark for what you want out of an unlimited spell. Okay? It doesn't have to be a really strong effect. If it is, hey, that's neat for your army. You don't necessarily have to have a strong effect in every single army. But what you do want is something that's not situational. That's the key. Not situational. Right. Thundershock. Pick a friendly Stormcast Eternals wizard to cast a spell and pick a visible enemy unit within 12 to be the target. And then do your casting roll. Effect, subtract 1 from wound rolls for the target's attack until the start of your next turn. Hey, that's pretty good, right? 12-inch range is a bit short, but -1 to wound is a good effect. And if you're not in range to cast Thundershock, you've always got Lightning Blast. I think that's a really good effect. It's very generally applicable. Like you kind of, if you're in range to do it, you may as well do it. It's like quite a good effect. So, unit in 12 gets -1 to wound. Straightforward. Always good. Good. Situational by range only. Okay, some things are situational because of like the type of thing that they do is not always useful. This thing is always useful if you get the effect. It's just that it's pretty short range, so there are going to be lots of times when you're not in range to use the ability, and that makes it kind of situational, but just because of the range. Then you got Starfall. Pick a friendly Stormcast Eternals wizard and pick a visible enemy infantry or cavalry unit within 18 of them to be the target and make a casting roll. Until the start of your next turn, subtract 1 from the number of dice rolled when making charge rolls for the target to a minimum of 1. Okay. So pick an infantry or cavalry unit in 18. Subtract 1 from the number. I'm just going to say charges on 1d6. Or -1 dice. There we go. So this is really powerful. Charging on 1 dice sucks. Even a 3-inch charge is a 50-50 prospect on 1 die. Like, it gets very hard to make a charge very quickly. If you're 6 inches away, that's not a hard distance on 2 dice. But 6 inches is almost guaranteed to fail on 1 die. So this effect is very strong, especially because the minimum distance is 3, and that means you've got a 50-50 chance. And all of the things I said about Lightning Echelon being unreliable and that being a big deal, that's the same thing for charge rolls. You do not want your charge rolls to be unreliable because you have to maneuver your troops into position before you make the charge rolls. So this is excellent. It's a really powerful effect. You can't put it on everything. It's only infantry or cavalry. I think that might just be to weaken the spell a bit. It's a bit unfortunate that it's sort of random. If you're playing against Stormcast and you happen to be like Gargants or something where you don't really have infantry or cavalry, then you don't have to worry about Starfall, or if all your really important units are big monsters. But if you're an infantry or cavalry heavy army, then you all of a sudden you have to worry about Starfall, and I don't necessarily like that disparity. So I'm going to say infantry or cavalry restriction is a bit random. There's a lot of this in the new edition, like infantry or cavalry or whatever, and I'm yet to see a pattern that makes sense. Like in other games, like if you play something like say Age of Empires, like a video game, they have a rock paper scissors for their unit types. So archers are good against infantry or spearmen, I guess in particular, are good against cavalry, and cavalry are good against archers. There's like a little triangle. Age of Empires actually has like 30 different little counter triangles. The whole game is knowing exactly what combination of units to build to counter the combination of units somebody else is using. And I thought that might be the case here, where infantry sort of do a certain thing and cavalry do a certain thing, but they haven't really done it like that. So abilities like this feel like just randomly you'll be able to target some units and randomly you won't be able to target other units. And that's just fate or something. Like, who knows, right? And there are whole armies that don't have infantry or cavalry or whatever. And it's just, I guess that just happens, right? Against those armies, you just don't get this spell. Why? Who knows? Who cares? It's not really a game design thing. It's just like a random thing. That annoys me, but this is a really powerful effect, so they're probably just trying to weaken it and limit it a little bit. I'm glad that it has 18 inches range. A lot of spells like this, because they're such a powerful effect, they limit them by reducing the range, but it needs to have enough range that the opponent can move. Like, you're in range to cast it, then they can move, and then they're still a distance away from you, right? Because this effect is much stronger, it's much more interesting and more useful if they're not just charging because they're within 3 inches of you. If you can get this at a further away distance, this effect becomes more interesting and more compelling. So if it was on a 12-inch thing, then you'd be like, okay, well, it's still good because it's still a 4+, whatever, but nowhere near as interesting. You're never going to have those 5-inch or 6-inch charges, really. Not necessarily never. Like, units do move 4, but if you're within 12, you're probably even closer than actually 12 inches away. So I really like this. I like this as a set of spells because pretty much you can just cast whatever you're in range to cast. If you are in combat, then you use Thundershock, right? There's no sense making them not want to charge you. This is a weak effect, so you just pick Thundershock if you are in combat. Oh, I just realized I don't have my mouse highlight on. I'll do that. It's probably not that important. But yeah, you can pick Thundershock if you're in combat. If you're not in combat, but you're close to the enemy, you can use Starfall, right? So long as you're not in combat with them, this is a really good choice. It makes them harder, makes it much harder for them to charge you. It's a really powerful effect. But if you're more than 18 inches away from them, then you can always just use Lightning Blast, right? You've always got something for your wizard to do, and it's always, it's either impactful if you're close to them, or it does at least something if you're not close to them. Or if like you're within 18, but they're not an infantry or cavalry unit, you can still use Lightning Blast. So I really, really, really like the overall package of the spell lore. It makes your wizards really versatile, gives them good tools, means that they're always a threat. If you, if you get near them, they've got really powerful effects, but if you don't get near them, they're still doing something. They're not just wasting their time standing around. And I think that's really fun. And just good design overall. So like 10 out of 10, I love the spell lore. Yeah, that's fine. I don't need to write that down. Prayer laws. Okay. I think Stormcast have a really good prayer lore as well. Okay. Healing Storm. Answer value is a 4+. Pick a friendly Stormcast Eternals priest to chant this prayer. Pick a visible Stormcast Eternals unit wholly within 12 to be the target. Then make a chanting roll d6. Heal d3 the target. If the chanting roll is 8+, heal d3 each visible friendly Stormcast Eternals within 12 instead. So, answers on a 4. I didn't write the casting values for the spells because anything 7 or below I don't care about. I've got a video on why I don't care about that. But it is nice, just incidentally, that the universal spell, the unlimited spell, is a 5. Actually, I might make a point of that. Most of the time, casting value doesn't matter. But the unlimited spell is the thing that your opponent is least likely to be able to unbind. Right? If you have, like, let's say you have 10 casts, you have 5 heroes, and every single one of them, actually, your entire army is wizards. You've just taken auxiliary units, and they're all wizards. You have like 10 casts, okay? Those wizards are all going to be casting the unlimited spell. Or not all of them. 2 of them might not. Maybe you cast a manifestation or 2, but the bulk of your wizards are going to cast the unlimited spell. Your opponent is going to try and unbind the good spells, okay? So what's left over is all of your unlimited spells. And having a low casting value is important for those spells. For the spells that your opponent is probably going to try and unbind, the casting value doesn't really matter. The unbind is going to be higher than the casting value most of the time. But for the unlimited spell in particular, it's good to have a low casting value. So it's a casting value of 5, very hard to fail. Okay, that's useful. All right, answers on a 4-up. Pick a unit in 12. Heal it d3 on an 8+. Heal everyone in 12. Okay. For priests, you want a slightly different thing. This is not an always useful ability, but for priests, that's not a problem. Okay, if everyone within 12 inches of you is full health, that's fine. It's still useful that you can target anyone within 12 inches, including yourself, because you can just generate ritual points every single turn. So what you're looking for with an unlimited prayer in particular, but with a prayer lore in general, is something that the priest can do every single turn and then just not answer. He just wants an eligible target every single turn. So Healing Storm is great. It is situational because you're not always damaged, but you can just use this ability every turn to generate ritual points. So that's fantastic. That's what you want. Can target self, always generating ritual points. The fact that like when it goes off on an 8+, you can heal every unit. That's very, very rare that you'll be in that situation, but when you are, you might have the points, and it'll be neat to have. It could end up healing a lot of things, and healing's not a bad thing to have in your back pocket. It's just that you don't want to be giving up something for it. But thankfully, because of the new lore system, you don't have to give up anything to get Healing Storm. All right, Bless Weapons. It's got an answer value of 6, and you pick a dude to chant it, pick a infantry unit, it has to be infantry specifically, within 12 inches to be the target, and make a chanting roll. Add 1 to the attacks characteristic of the target's melee weapons until the start of your next turn. If the chanting roll was 12+, this ability affects all visible Stormcast Eternals units wholly within 12 of the chanter. Okay, so we got answers on a 6+. Pick an infantry unit in 12. I'm not sure I love that it's restricted to infantry. Is this restricted to infantry? No. Weird. It gets +1 attack. On a 12+, everyone gets +1 attack. Everyone in 12. Okay, so the answering value is really high. I was a bit worried that we'd see lots of prayers like this, that pretty much priests would only get a prayer off every second turn, and it would just slow them down a lot and be kind of lame. But it is okay having 1 or 2 prayers that are like this, and given that you can use Magical Intervention to pray on both turns, and that you also have some double prayers, like Ionis, I think he's a double, like a power level 2 priest. He's the kind of guy that will get to this 12+ pretty easily. I think someone might need to do an analysis on how difficult it gets, because once you start banking ritual points, when you roll a 1, you lose D3 ritual points. So I don't know what the exact math on storing up dice rolls is, like the average to get to that 12. But I assume you need about 4 prayers, 4 chanting things to get to 12 up. So you're investing a lot of turns to get this effect. Even the 6 up is, you probably want to invest 2 turns of chanting to get +1 attack. The effect is pretty powerful, but you only get it on infantry. I feel like most of your armies are going to have some infantry. Stormcast don't have a bunch of monsters in their list. It's really only the full dragons list that you're not going to have infantry, and that's a bit sad. But I suppose even in that case, even when you're playing like full dragons, you can store up and get the big 12. It's just that it's not going to be very effective on dragons, because a lot of their attacks are going to be companion weapons anyway, which is kind of weird. Like it makes it weird that they've restricted it to infantry, because infantry are generally a good target for this anyway, because all of the infantry attacks aren't companion attacks. Whereas cavalry, the Draconiths and the Stormdrake Guard and stuff, the Paladors, they all have a decent number of decent quality attacks that are companion weapons that won't benefit from the +1 attack anyway. So I just don't think Blessed Weapons would have been, I guess, too powerful by putting it on them. Maybe the thing they're worried about is units like Karazai, like special characters or something, Star Drakes and that. I still don't really see it. They only have a few profiles, so adding 1 to the attacks there isn't that big of an issue anyway. But overall, this prayer is still very good. This effect is a reliable effect. Like, there are lots of good targets for it, I should say. So I'm happy about that. And this powerful effect is pretty good as well, right? You get to pick a whole bunch of units. It affects himself as well. He's probably an infantry unit. Actually, yeah, if it's Ionis, he can't pick himself, but a lot of priests will be able to pick themselves. Yeah, this is a very good ability. Translocation. Declare, pick a friendly Stormcast Eternals priest to chant this prayer. Pick a visible friendly Stormcast Eternals unit wholly within 12 of them to be the target. So you got to be within 12, and it's any Stormcast Eternals unit. Make a chanting roll. Remove the target from the battlefield and set it up again. More than 9 from all enemy units. In addition, if the chanting roll is 8+, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target that unit for the rest of the battle round. Okay, so answers on a 4+. Teleport a unit in 12. That's it. I don't need to roll this additional effect. Write this additional effect. Just like with Shock and Awe, this is not a very useful effect. There are some situations, but by and large, you're not going to care much about one hit rolls. You're just going to use translocation. You're not going to worry about whether or not you get the 8+. It's just incidental. Sometimes you'll have an 8+ because you have a bunch of stored points. I think you're just interested in, you can teleport a unit. You don't have to worry about it being in combat. You just got to be within 12 of the priest. This is a very reliable, really powerful ability and a good piece of technology to have in your army. Especially good that, like, this is a bit situational. Not exactly situational. A teleport is usually good to have. But you can do other things with your time, even though you've picked translocation. I don't think you really ever had a problem with that because you would take a Lord Relictor, and the Lord Relictor has like 2 prayers on his War Scroll. He can, well, not 2 prayers, he can like heal a thing or damage a thing or teleport a thing. Those are all really good options. And yeah, you still got really good options here. You can buff a guy in combat, you can teleport a guy, or you can bank points or heal someone. It's very rare that you won't have something useful to be doing with your priest. There's a good selection of options that makes them very flexible. They don't all cover the same ground. I was a bit worried with some spell laws that you'll get 3 spells that do almost the same thing. Whereas these are fairly varied effects. So I think priests are really valuable for the army. You're definitely going to want one, and they're always going to be doing something really useful. So yeah, just solid. It's sad that it answered on a 4-up. This used to be really, really reliable. You can make it more reliable by banking the points, and I kind of like that. Being able to do this on your opponent's turn is also very useful. Like, you can teleport something out of combat in your opponent's turn, and you can do it really reliably if you've got a bunch of points banked. So having points banked, ready to use translocation, I actually didn't even think of that. Hold on, maybe I do need to write this. Yeah, for the rest of the battle round, because you might do this in your opponent's turn. So, what is it? 8+ -1 to hit for that turn 2. Okay. I'm just gonna say solid. That's just a really useful ability, pretty much all the time. Good value for lots of targets. Infantry restriction is unnecessary. So overall, very good prayer lore. These sorts of things, even healing's good in your opponent's turn as well. If you're damaged and you need to heal, that can be quite good. So I'd be pretty happy being a Stormcast Eternals player with these 2 lores, the prayer lore and the spell lore. They've got a good selection of things, and they're all useful. The lores are useful all the time. You've got some situational stuff, but you've always got something to do for your priests and your wizards that is useful, even if that's just generating points so that you can use the really powerful effects of translocation and blessed weapons. That's a really neat setup for a prayer lore. Having something that you can always do that maybe is a bit situational on the unlimited spell, but then having these really powerful effects, and especially having this kind of thing that you need to build up a lot of points for. You won't be using it every single turn, but you've got something that you can build up points every turn using. Every priest in your army can build up points using Healing Storm, and then on the turns that you need it, they can use Blessed Weapons, right? Whereas if you have a different spell lore and your unlimited spell is really situational and you can't target a friendly unit with it or something, and you have to use one of these two spells that aren't unlimited to build up points, then you have to like fight over, if you've got multiple priests, you have to fight over that spell, who's generating points and who's using a useful thing and whatever. This is just very easy. You guys can all build up points and then they can spend them on really powerful effects. So very, very good prayer lore in my opinion. The manifestation lore I'm not going to spend much time on. The real interest about manifestations is going to be when we get to their war scrolls. But there is some useful information for, I think, for the Dias Arcanum. So these two have the range of the spells. And I guess I'll make a note. I've got manifestations. There's the Dias. And that's... we'll talk about that in a second. The Vortex. I think the Vortex is an 18-inch range. The ranges for all these spells probably went up because they can't move the turn they're summoned, the predatory ones. So you used to set them up like within 8 and then move them 8 again, but now they just set up within like 18 and they can't move that turn. So the ranges generally went up because of that. The Comet is 18 as well. Actually, Comet's range went down a lot. Comet is not a predatory spell. And it used to have like a 30-inch range, which was really cool because you could fire the Comet from outside the unbind range of the enemy, and it has like a penalty to cast on it. So your wizard can reliably cast the Comet without facing an unbind, hit their wizard with it, and penalize their wizard. Then you can move into unbind range because you cast before you move, and then they have to, with the penalty, try and cast their spells through an unbind. Really, really useful sort of play pattern for Comet, which you just can't do now because of the range of the Comet. Anyway, Dias Arcanum is what we're here for. So you pick a Stormcast Eternals wizard to cast the spell, but then pick a Stormcast Eternals infantry hero. So any infantry hero that does not have fly and is wholly within 12 of them to be the target. That's a pretty big selection. I'm pretty sure the old Dias Arcanum, the guy casting the spell got the Dias. But now you can give it to someone else, which is a big deal. You set the Dias Arcanum up within half an inch of the target, visible to the caster and not in combat, then remove the target from the battlefield and place it on the platform of that Dias Arcanum. So the Dias gives them fly and move 12 or something like this. You can give it to like a combat hero or even like Bastion or something. I'm pretty sure there's nothing here stopping you from using it on them. And then they can fly. And you can also get this bit of extra movement. You put it within half inches and then put them on the thing. They do have to be wholly within 12 of the hero, of the wizard casting the spell. But that's the only restriction. So this is, once we see the Dias Arcanum, the fact that you can pick just any infantry hero that doesn't have fly and sort of just give them this bonus is really neat. So I just wanted to point that out before you move. Pick an infantry hero. Put the Dias next to them, and then put them on it. So I'm not certain how big the Dias Arcanum is, but the fact that you set it up next to them and then put them on it means that they also get not just that half-inch movement, but also like half the width of the Dias Arcanum in movement as well. So if you're trying to throw Bastion at the enemy, he'll get a couple inches movement out of this, and then he'll get movement 12. And he'll just rocket across the board. This is actually a kind of cool thing to have. Again, because you don't have to pay points for it, and because you don't have to you can just pick the spell lore. And then you've got this option in your back pocket all the time to move a guy that quickly. I feel like you can do it in combat and stuff as well. I don't think it cares about that. So you can put it on a guy who's in combat and they can retreat and get out of combat that way, or retreat and fly over the thing they're in combat with. There's lots and lots of uses for this summon Dias Arcanum. So I just look out for this. It's the only like one of these summon rules that I've read, and I thought actually that's really neat. Okay. I'm just checking the clock because I've been here for an hour and 25 minutes. I'll probably release this as a part 1, and then I'll do the War Scrolls as a part 2. I'll record that in the future sometime, probably in the next couple of days, so have a look out for that. I'm going to add, I do have like a Patreon and a Coffee account set up for people to be able to donate, and this is the first video where I'm going to put that on this video, because this project of doing all the faction focuses or the faction packs is quite a big project. So if people want to throw me a couple dollars for doing it, it is taking up a lot of time. So I do really appreciate that. One thing I want to point out again, just for the like, in that sort of vein, the YouTube marketing kind of vein, I really hate doing the e-begging stuff. But I do want to point something out about liking videos. A lot of the time people have an aversion to liking things. I know I do, especially on things like Facebook, because I don't want all my friends to know that I liked something. Even if it's something that I do really like. I like Warhammer stuff. I'll like a video, but then all my friends see, oh, so-and-so liked this Warhammer thing, and I don't want to announce to everyone I know every little thing I'm doing. I don't think they care about Warhammer, and so I don't want to tell them, so I don't like things, and I just end up never hitting the like button. On YouTube, you don't have friends that follow your stuff and it doesn't announce to them all that you're liking it, okay? So if you like my video, just give it a like. It just helps with the algorithm. That is like all it does on YouTube. No one's paying attention to your YouTube likes. So I just wanted to point that out. Again, I'll have those links in the description if you want to donate. And yeah, I'm going to leave it there for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you got something out of it.